I used to work for a company that built highly specialized manufacturing equipment. These weren't machines you could just plug in and run. They required training, precision, and hours of careful installation. Customers had two options: pay the company to send a qualified engineer to install the unit, or save money and receive a set of instructions so their own engineers could attempt it. There was a catch. Those instructions were intentionally difficult to follow, and once a customer chose to install the machine themselves, company policy was clear: we would never touch it again. If something went wrong, they were completely on their own. I had spent years doing these installations, and even with my experience, there were times I had to stop and think. One of our customers, let's call him Jake, was the kind of person who always believed he was smarter than everyone else. After I left the company for a different job, he somehow kept my number. Months later, on a Friday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Jake. He told me they had a new unit still in boxes and another that needed maintenance. I explained that I no longer worked for the company, but I could put him in touch with someone who did. That's when he made his offer. He said he'd pay me double my current rate if I came down over the weekend. He complained that the company's installation fees had gone up and that the instructions made no sense. His engineers had already tried and failed, and he made it sound urgent, like his entire production line depended on it. I hesitated, but the money was tempting. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Saturday morning, I arrived at his facility. Boxes were stacked everywhere, waiting to become a working machine. I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. Installing one of these units involved hours of unbolting, wiring, aligning, and configuring. By the time 6 hours had passed, I was sweaty, exhausted, and nearly finished. That's when Jake showed up. I expected a handshake, maybe a thank you. Instead, he smiled smugly and said, "Sorry, we just don't have the budget to pay you. My engineers will take it from here." I just stared at him. 6 hours of my weekend gone, and he thought he could dismiss me like that? I was furious, but then something clicked. Jake had no idea what kind of mistake he just made. Buried deep inside the machine was a tiny button. You'd never know it existed unless you were trained on it. Press it, and the machine enters test mode. Everything looks normal. It powers on, lights up, but it won't configure, won't run properly, and won't pass any checks. The instructions never mention this button. You wouldn't even know to look for it. Before packing up my tools, I quietly pressed it. Then I left. By Monday morning, my phone was blowing up. Call after call from Jake. I ignored them all. By Wednesday, my voicemail was full. Finally, I answered. Jake was furious. His engineers had been tearing their hair out, and the machine still wouldn't work. He demanded to know what was wrong. I calmly told him, "Not my problem. You didn't pay me." He argued. He tried guilt. Then he begged. He said his business was losing money every hour that machine was down. Finally, he asked what it would take for me to come back. I told him, £7,000 up front, or I don't touch it. He exploded, called me greedy, said it was outrageous. I hung up. The next day, he called again. This time, his tone was different, defeated. He agreed to pay. I made it clear I wouldn't lift a finger until the money hit my account. Eventually, it did. £7,000 transferred in full. The next morning, I walked back into the facility. Jake and his engineers were standing there, exhausted and angry. Without saying a word, I pulled out a small pin, reached into the machine, and pressed the hidden button, taking it out of test mode. Instantly, the system came to life. Weeks of frustration undone in seconds. Jake's face was priceless. His engineers stood there slaw-jawed. I packed up my tools and walked out. 20 minutes of work, £7,000. Jake learned 2 lessons that day. Never underestimate an engineer, and never, ever try to stiff one.